Okay. Hi all, thanks so much for coming to our Picpoul Zoom. We're talking about the two Picpouls that we just released in our wine club and also for the spring release. We have the Trobairises, which is our direct press Picpoul from the 2019 vintage. And then we have our Moresque from 2017, which is our long skin ferment contact Picpoul as well. So we're going to talk about those two, why we have two of them, why we make wines like that, and also something very special and magical that happened with the Moresque Picpoul, being that it was aged in barrel sous voile. So we're going to get into that as well, because that's kind of a really cool thing that you don't see every day unless you're really familiar with wines from the Jura region of France. And then you would be like, oh yeah, that's totally a thing. Matteo, how's it going?
It's going well. We're getting ready. I'm up at the vineyard, and we're getting ready to do some grafting in a couple weeks. And so I'm just ran down into the office to take a break and hang out with you guys for a little bit and talk about some Picpoul. Take a break from flagging the vines that we're going to graft in a couple weeks. So I'm in, it's a beautiful, amazing day up here in the vineyard. We've got about that much green growth on the vines. So everything's just kind of starting for the year. So anyway, yeah, thanks so much for joining. Awesome to have you guys in. And on the Picpouls. Yeah, so what's up with Picpoul? It's kind of a cool variety. Not in my experience, it was never anything extremely serious. All of the Picpoul de Pinet, the French Picpouls that I tried, were very good, typically very good, but also just tended to be fairly light, fairly thin, acid driven, maybe some aromatics, but essentially no body. Basically the kind of thing that was perfect to drink on the when you're on the when you're in the south of France on the Riviera, and it's a beautiful hot day and you're sitting out looking out over the Mediterranean. It's the perfect thing to drink. Taken out of its context, out of that south of France context, it's a great, the French Picpoul de Pinet tend to be great food wines because they're so acid driven, but they're very much of a piece. They all tended to be, just as in my experience, just as I described them to you. Acid driven, not a lot of body, some good aromatics, but just essentially nothing in terms of weight. So when we came up to when we purchased the vineyard in 2013, there was Picpoul already planted here, and we thought, great, well, we'll make a Picpoul like the Picpoul de Pinet. Perfect, that sounds awesome. It's quite warm up here in Calaveras in the summer, and the idea of having something just like a Picpoul de Pinet sounded wonderfully appealing. So we picked it. Didn't do anything crazy with it that first year because we just wanted to see kind of how it turned out. So went direct to press with the fruit and fermented it. I'd have to think back actually on that 14. I'm not actually sure if we fermented that in barrel or in stainless, but it wasn't nothing fancy. And nothing really different than we do typically with any of our other whites, direct to press whites, that is. And when it finished ferment and we tasted that first vintage of Picpoul, it was a little bit of a surprise because unlike all of the Picpoul de Pinet that I had tried, it actually had an unbelievable amount of body, of presence. Not of fat so much. It still is, very much acid driven, but it actually has some texture and some palate presence. which was really cool. It was very unexpected. And so we kind of realized that the Picpoul is actually very happy here, and it expresses that happiness by producing a wine that is delicious but atypical from the wines that are produced in its native region. So it's kind of a it's like it took a left turn on us, and I do love the left turns. So we've made a Picpoul every year in that fashion, a direct to press fashion, and started to wonder about maybe some of the other some of its potentiality. What are some other things that we might be able to do with this? This is seems like a really it's a very compelling wine. So, and it has these very particular characteristics in terms of its chemistry as a grape and as juice or must. So we thought, hey, what else can we do with this? So we produced a traditional method sparkling with it for a few years. That was the Heinzelmann. We decided that we would also like to see how it was when it was fermented in contact with skins. And so that leads us to the second of our two Picpouls for today, the Moresque. That was a really kind of a cool that was a cool adventure. Maybe we'll get to that in a minute. I don't know if we want to keep maybe why don't we stick to the Trobairises for the first portion, and then we can move on to the Moresque in a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good plan. I think for some things that people like to know, I guess, is like pairing suggestions. That's always a thing that people want to know. And I would say that for the Picpoul, the Trobairises, the direct press, it's just so easy to pair food with that it's not even like, I don't even know what to say other than like you can pretty much pair that with anything. I can't even think of something that it wouldn't be good with, to be honest. I don't know.
That's that's kind of one of the things that I feel that in which white wine kind of has it all over red. White wine can kind of go anywhere it wants. And with red wine can be very flexible as well, but there are certain things that just don't go well with red wine. I think actually when we're talking about Armandus on our last Zoom, I'm talking about trying it with oysters, which was absolutely awful. But white wines like this Picpoul, yeah, I totally agree. You almost can't go wrong when you think about the sort of the traditional pairings that you might find with a Picpoul de Pinet in the south of France. You're talking about any kind of fresh caught grilled seafood. Any kind of just yank it out of the ocean, throw it over an open fire, and enjoy it with that Picpoul. I think you can do that with ours as well. But it goes on from there. Some Yardbird for sure. Yeah, how about remember that? How about that smoked chicken galantine that Ruben made for us like 3 years ago at Harvest?
Yeah.
So boned a whole chicken and stuffed it with, I don't even remember mushroom duxelle, and I can't remember what else he put in there, and then rolled it up and trussed it and put that on the grill and smoked it. So you get this wonderful flavor of roasted smoked chicken with all the richness of the mushrooms as well. That, I think that would be an amazing pairing with the Picpoul, with our Trobairises, the direct to press Picpoul. So if you're just looking for like a quick weeknight meal that you can throw together. Just bone a chicken, pound it out flat, stuff it with mushrooms and maybe some scallops, and smoke it for like 4 hours on the grill. That'd be great.
Just quick and easy, simple. Don't stress out. It's no big deal. Or just get an In-N-Out burger and French fries. I think that would be a good pairing for the Picpoul as well. I'm just saying.
And honestly, like that sounds amazing. And that's a great example though of, something that, some like you might think like, oh, you want a red wine. You want a red wine with your with the burger, with an In-N-Out burger. And yeah, nothing wrong with that. But oh man, that Picpoul would be amazing. Yeah, with that, yeah, just the richness of the burger, the saltiness of the fries, and then that acid in the Picpoul to cut it.
That's what's up.
Sure.
That's our professional opinion on pairing white wine with meat and French fries. If anyone has any questions, just pop them in the chat or raise your little hand or unmute yourself or whatever. But I think we should move on to the Moresque, because I think that's kind of, I don't want to say the more interesting of the two, just only because of the style that we made it is just so much more involved in what we had to do to create it. And then some nature elements that just kind of happen. So like Matthew said, skin fermenting, the Moresque has been used as a name for several different wines. It hasn't always been Picpoul, it's been Albarino. It's gonna be, did we ever release the Vermentino? Did we do a Vermentino? We did a Vermentino. No, that went into the
we did, but it's 19. That might be the 19.
Yeah.
So it's down the road.
Yeah, exactly. So that you'll see that name keep popping up, but it's to delineate that being the very long skin contact wines. So talk to us about why we wanted to do that, and then we'll talk about the voile, because that's the really fun part.
It's funny looking back on the whole the Moresque concept now, because going into, I think the first vintage of Moresque that we made was in 2015, and that was a skin fermented Albarino. And I had this idea, and still hold this belief that that aromatic white wines produce more compelling skin fermented whites than varieties that don't have a lot of aromatics. Like take Chardonnay as an example. I've had some skin fermented Chardonnays that I didn't think were bad, but I couldn't actually name one that I've had that I was really excited about. But if you take aromatic varieties in any stripe, Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc, Vermentino, Muscat, Savagnin, Ribolla, Gewürztraminer, any of these that have these wonderful aromatics, and then you ferment you make that wine by fermenting it on the skins, you get this crazy interaction of all of the aromatic compounds being oxidized during ferment and going off in a totally different direction. And it adds this dimension to the wine that is still, those aromatics are still there if you go direct to press, but it just takes it in a, kind of, like I said, in a different direction or a different dimension. So the first couple of years we did the Moresque, we made it with Albarino, which is an aromatic variety, and I really enjoyed. I think we really liked the way that wine turned out. And then for some reason, I have no idea what was going through my head. I thought, hey, well, as I said before, like we've been thinking about, hey, this Picpoul is so good. Let's try it in a bunch of different iterations and kind of see what it can do. so we did the traditional method sparkling, which was wonderful. And then for some reason, even though Picpoul's not, and I wouldn't term it an aromatic variety, it's for some reason I thought it'd be a great idea to do that on the skins. And so we put it into a fermenter, let it ferment on the skins, and it finished. And I remember tasting it when we put it down to puncheon. And I remember thinking, this is really, really angry. I don't know if this is gonna chill out. It was so angular. The acid was so pronounced. And one thing that comes along with the territory of fermenting white grapes on the skins, depending on the variety, you can get a little bit or a lot of tannin in the wine, or end up with tannin in the wine. And it can be a good thing. It can be an awkward thing. It just depends on the ferment and the variety and kind of how you approach it. In the case of this Picpoul, it was an awkward thing. So you had this really, really aggressive, sharp, biting acid, and then you had this really kind of angry, blocky, chunky tannin. And and then there wasn't a huge amount of aromatic complexity to maybe if it had been muscat with that blocky tannin and that sharp acid, but then you had all these crazy beautiful floral aromatics floating around on top of it. It might have been different. You might think, okay, cool, well, let's just let that stuff chill out and this will be great. But wait, we'll let it chill out, but what are we waiting to enjoy? There doesn't seem to be anything there aside from the angry acid and the tannin. And so, I thought, cool, well, we'll just deal with that down the road when we've got other things to think about. We've got other things to worry about. I'll just sock it in this puncheon and we'll take a look at it later. And then I think I remember August of 18. So we're heading into the next vintage. I did a last round of topping up our barrels in the cellar before harvest, and then harvest started, and we crazy busy, and we're bringing in, picking the vineyard, bringing in the new fruit, making the wines in 2018. And so the puncheon was topped in August. So we went through September, getting into October, maybe late October. And I think, oh God, I need to get into the cellar and top these wines again. And I open up the puncheon of the Picpoul, the Moresque, and I hadn't noted. Usually when we do barrel work, I'll either make a little note on our clipboard, details all the work that we're doing, or we'll just chalk it on the barrel head, if a barrel is partial. And this puncheon, I had not remembered that we'd racked it into the puncheon and had not had enough wine to fill it. And so, it was about that empty. And I, at the time, had told myself, like, okay, make a note, find some topping material, and we'll top this puncheon up. And, but I hadn't made the note, and then I'd forgotten. And when I came back after harvest, pulled the bung out of the barrel and took a look inside, and it kind of feel my heart sink, like, oh God, I forgot to top this barrel. And I shine my torch inside, and I can see this skin had grown over the top of the wine. And I went from feeling, very, very disappointed in myself and very sad to suddenly curious and possibly a little hopeful, because we've never made, prior to this point, I'd never made a wine aged under yeast, aged under voile, in the fashion that they do well, I would liken this more to the type of voile that grows, or that wines are aged under in Jura rather than say the floor that grows on top of the wines in Jerez, on top of the sherry barrels, because the voile that I've seen in the Jura is thinner. You can almost see through it, almost depending on where it is in its kind of growth cycle. It can get a little thicker, a little thinner, but it's more like a skein across the top rather than a cake. In Jerez, they've got to actually like poke down through it to get to sample the wine. Whereas this is just like a skin floating on the top. So I thought, oh well, maybe it's not wrecked. We took a sample out and tasted it, and it was quite good. And that led to doing some research and some reading on voile yeast and what actually goes on and what they do while they're sitting on top of the wine. And kind of fascinating, they can actually metabolize both ethanol and volatile acidity. So if their growth conditions are right, if they're happy, if the wine that they're sitting on top of is to their liking, and you are taking samples and monitoring it, you'll actually see the alcohol and the VA go down even as you're, say, losing wine volume to evaporation. And so normally if you're losing water to evaporation out of a barrel, you'll see your alcohol go up and you'll see your VA go up just because you're concentrating it by removing water. So here it's you're losing water because you're aging with air in the barrel, but instead of the alcohol and the VA going up, they actually decrease because the voile are feeding on it. And so that's kind of like this little kind of amazing miracle of microbiology, which is rad, but it's not predictable. It's not, you can't really make it happen. The yeast are either happy on that wine or they're not, and they don't like every wine, for sure. Even if they do grow on a particular wine, they'll go through cycles. So you'll have a bloom, the skein will form, it'll be there. You'll see the VA go down and the alcohol go down, maybe a lot, maybe a little, but neither of them are climbing. And then it'll just disappear. The skein will disappear and sink into the bottom of the barrel, and then there won't be a voile on top. And then it comes back. And that's really cool, except when the voile's not there, now you've got a partial barrel that's just got a ton of oxygen in it that isn't protected, and the wine's not protected from anything. So it's a little maddening and terrifying, but if it works, it can also be quite exciting. And in 2017, with this Moresque, the skin fermented Picpoul that serendipitously decided to age itself sous voile, made it. It made the journey post ferment across. Oh, I should look this up. I think it was 2 years in barrel, sous voile, and then into bottle. So yeah, so it's very different, obviously very different in character than the Trobairises and the direct to press Picpoul. It's a little, it is really, I think, a truly rare creature. And yeah, there's a little bit, there's a little bit of magic in every wine, if you kind of think about kind of the magic of what all the microbes that are involved with fermentation do. It's this kind of like invisible world that does all these things right in front of you. You just can't see it going on, but it's happening right there. the Moresque has this Moresque has one more step, one more stage of magic, one more layer of magic. So yeah, yeah, another very serendipitous occurrence, but a wonderful rare creature. And I don't know how much. I don't even know how much we have.
We had two. It was
of
2
it.
barrels.
It's not.
I think 2 barrels worth. So, we have about, it was 51 cases total. So about 2 barrels worth, and we have like 17 cases left. So a rare one. Did you, and you might have said this and I missed it. Is it like, what's the sulfur relationship with the voile? Does it destroy it if you sulfur it?
It does. Yeah, voile yeast will not hang out with sulfur. And so this is I spent a couple hours talking with a great fella in the Jura about how he approaches the kind of courting the voile and encouraging it. And he basically said, look, the scariest time, like the most terrifying time, if you want to make a wine sous voile, the most terrifying time is the little period in time between when primary fermentation ends and when the voile forms. They don't know how long that's going to take. And he said in some of our barrels, it's instant. Like as soon as primary ends, you can see it forming already, and that's like awesome. And then in other barrels, it can even be the same lot. Even the voile just won't form, and it takes longer. You can see it starting, but it's not really forming, and it just, for whatever reason, it takes longer. And it's like playing chicken. You might get the voile to form before the VA climbs too much, or you start to lose aromatic character to oxidization, or whatever. There are so many things you could potentially be worried about. And the way that you can either top your barrel all the way up to avoid some of those, or you can add sulfur, or both. But if you do top your barrel or add sulfur, you're not going to get voile. And so it's this kind of like game of chicken, waiting for the voile to form, knowing that if you want voile, you can't add sulfur, but being afraid of what might happen to the wine if you don't top your barrel or you don't add sulfur. So we, the entire time that our Moresque was sous voile, by necessity, it could not have sulfur added. If the voile is the correct type of yeast and is happy, as I was saying before, it can actually metabolize VA and alcohol. So, sorry, important piece I forgot too. There's a funny sort of interaction with oxygen that goes on, in that the voile actually keeps the wine, blankets the wine, and prevents direct oxygen transfer into the wine. But in some way, I'm not actually sure the microbial mechanism of this, the voile is transferring oxygen into the wine, because you do get oxidative characters. Things in the wine do oxidize as it's aging sous voile, but it's very different than if it were just wine left open, or in a partial barrel. So the way that it regulates the movement of oxygen into the wine essentially prevents things like acetobacter, which create acetic acid, which will turn your wine. It's vinegar, so it keeps the bacteria that turn your wine into vinegar from entering into the wine. Or even if they were in the wine, essentially keeps them from being metabolically viable, because there's no oxygen. So it's kind of it's a little microbial miracle. But no sulfur. You cannot add sulfur wall to wall if you want to maintain the wall.
Right. So Philip is asking, is there a relationship between when the voile forms and when secondary fermentation finishes, or with residual CO2? Excellent question, Philip.
Certainly could be. There could be there. Yeah, that's a great question. There could be a correlation there. I don't know. Dissolved CO2 in the wine may have an impact. Yeah, I mean, there's so many potential factors that could have an impact on that. But totally, yeah, that seems totally reasonable. That'd be like a logical thing, like maybe a CO2 bubbling up underneath the wall, make the wall. They're like, hey, oh, I don't like that. What's tickling me? And then they don't want to get going for a while.
Voile, did a voile develop on anything else since? I feel like it was on a Chardonnay barrel, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I've had a couple. We've had some other voile, some wines, sous voile, since that 17. I've made some missteps. I've discovered that you can't just kind of age it indefinitely, or at least not the wine that I tried to do that with. I had a few trial barrels of Chardonnay. Sort of after my visit to the Jura, it got me really thinking about sous voile aged Chardonnay. I tasted some amazing ones there, and so I tried it a few different ways. Lost a barrel by kind of like letting it hang out too long, pushing it a little too hard. Had to put that one down the drain, but same vintage, one that I kind of approached a little differently, is still in the cellar right now. And I think we've got something else too.
Was it Chenin?
It's under the wall. I think that is the Chenin. That's right. Yeah. So we've got some stuff coming. Other sous voile things. The thing is, it's like we can't really. You almost can't decide. You can decide to hope that the voile evolves in that barrel. You can say, "Cool, let's try it with Chardonnay and see what happens." And if it decides it doesn't want to do it, it doesn't like that wine, it doesn't. So it's like we have I'm thinking about it all the time, but the actual formation of the voile is not up to us. Serving temperature for the Moresque. Skin fermented whites are an interesting creature because of the tannin. And a lot of times wines that, wines with present tannin can be a little awkward at cooler temperatures. This is personal preference, and it varies from wine to wine. But for me, Danielle, I don't know if you have a different idea on this too, but I basically just like cellar temperature, like high 50s to low 60s, kind of can't go wrong. And then if you think, oh, this is too warm, okay, all right, throw it in the fridge before you open the next bottle. Or this is too cold. If it's too cold, not a problem. It's going to come up to room temperature in like 5 minutes anyway in your glass. But yeah, like I think that temperature for the Moresque is safe because it's not so cold that it's going to make the tannin appear kind of rough or awkward. But I do tend to enjoy pretty much all my wines, even the reds, at cooler temperatures rather than warmer.
Same. I always start cold and then let it just take the bottle out and drink it from there. And then I don't have to keep going to the fridge anyway. That's my method. And for I think for this wine to pair it with food, definitely, obviously just kind of check it out first when you open it, because it's got a lot to it, and it does open up. I would actually say you could decant this wine and it would do probably good to do that, because I think if you just drink it straight out of the bottle and don't give it some time, you'll miss out on some flavors. I noticed that when Alex and I first opened a bottle a couple weeks ago. And I was like, I thought that this would be a little bit more like intense and in like head scratchery kind of like, wow. And then later had it like the same bottle that had been open for hours. And I was like, oh, okay, there it is. So it just, I think it would do well to give some time to open. I think it would age really well. I think I would say 5 to 10 years, it would still be banging, if not more. I don't know, Matthew, what do you think? It's got a lot of acid, so.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think, anywhere in that 5 to 10 year range. Yeah, because it's got the acid and it's got some tannin. So those two things are going to carry it for quite a while.
Yeah. Bury it at sea or put it on a boat and just sail around the world and then serve it at 58 degrees with some Thai noodles.
There's another good pairing. Yes.
Right? Like I feel like Thai food or Vietnamese food would be super good with that. Thank you all for coming to our TED Talk. What about the Trobairises? It's good. You missed it. We talked about it. Open it, drink it, put food in your mouth if you want. If not, that's okay. No one's going to call you an alcoholic. We are we're out of time, but thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you for buying the wines and for being our friends. Have a wonderful Thursday evening. Drink wine. Happy Earth Day. Bye.